Let's jump right into it. Number 7. Being left-handed could literally get you executed. In medieval Europe, if you naturally reached for things with your left hand, people didn't just think you were quirky, they thought you were in league with the devil himself. The Latin word for left is sinister, and that's not a coincidence. Medieval people believed the left side was the devil's side, which meant left-handed people were walking around with a giant neon sign screaming, "I'm evil," to everyone they met. Imagine trying to explain to a medieval court that you're not a demon worshiper, you just happen to be born with different neural wiring. Churches would literally refuse to let left-handed people take communion because they thought touching holy objects with your devil hand would contaminate them. Some left-handed people learned to force themselves to use their right hand just to survive, essentially rewiring their entire brain to avoid being burned at the stake. Think about that next time you effortlessly use your dominant hand. Medieval lefties had to choose between comfort and staying alive. Number 6. Red hair was considered absolute proof you were a witch or vampire. If you were born with natural red hair in medieval times, you basically won the worst genetic lottery possible. People genuinely believed redheads were created when their mothers had relations with demons during pregnancy, which meant every redhead was technically half demon in medieval minds. The logic was ironclad to them: fire is red, hell is full of fire, therefore red-haired people obviously came from hell. Red-headed women faced particular danger because witch hunters used hair color as primary evidence during trials. You could live a perfectly normal life, help your neighbors, attend church regularly, but if you had red hair and someone's cow died mysteriously, congratulations, you're now the prime suspect for supernatural murder. Some red-haired people would actually dye their hair with dangerous chemicals or wear head coverings their entire lives just to avoid suspicion. The medieval world was so terrified of red hair that some regions had laws requiring redheads to register with local authorities like they were walking weapons of mass destruction. Number 5. Owning a black cat was essentially signing your death warrant. Today we think black cats are either unlucky or adorable, but medieval people viewed them as literal demons in animal form. The church taught that black cats were either devils themselves or witches who had shapeshifted, which meant keeping one as a pet was like announcing to your entire village that you practiced dark magic. If someone found a black cat in your house, that was considered concrete evidence you were a witch, no further investigation needed. The paranoia got so intense that entire communities would organize black cat massacres, going door to door searching for these demon animals and killing any they found. Cat owners had to make impossible choices, abandon pets they loved or risk being accused of witchcraft themselves. Some people would actually kill their own black cats preemptively just to avoid suspicion from neighbors. The irony is that cats were actually crucial for controlling rat populations that spread diseases, but medieval people were so terrified of supernatural connections, they'd rather live with plague-carrying rodents than risk being associated with devil cats. Number 4. Washing yourself too frequently marked you as suspicious and possibly dangerous. This one completely flips our modern understanding of hygiene on its head. While we associate cleanliness with health and virtue, medieval people thought excessive bathing was a sign of vanity, worldliness, or worse, witchcraft. The logic was that God-fearing Christians should focus on spiritual cleanliness rather than physical appearance. So someone who bathed regularly was clearly more concerned with earthly pleasures than heavenly salvation. Bathhouses became associated with sin and debauchery, partly because they were often connected to prostitution, but also because the church promoted the idea that physical comfort led to spiritual corruption. If you showed up to church smelling too clean or with suspiciously soft skin, people would start whispering about your moral character and possibly your supernatural affiliation. Some saints were specifically praised for never bathing and allowing their bodies to decay as acts of holy devotion, which set the cultural standard that cleanliness was actually ungodly. Women faced particular scrutiny because beauty and cleanliness were seen as tools of seduction, potentially demonic seduction if you were too attractive or well-groomed. Number 3. Knowing too much about medicine or healing could get you burned alive as a witch. Here's where medieval logic gets truly terrifying. If you were good at helping people feel better, you were probably evil. Reasoning was that medical knowledge came from either divine inspiration through official church channels or demonic instruction through witchcraft. And since most effective healers weren't ordained priests, they must be getting their knowledge from devils. Women were especially vulnerable because they traditionally handled family health care and had extensive knowledge of herbal remedies passed down through generations. But this practical knowledge made them prime targets during witch hunts because inquisitors couldn't understand how someone could know effective treatments without supernatural help. If your herbal tea actually cured someone's illness, that was suspicious. If your treatment failed and someone died, that was evidence you were deliberately harming people with magic. Healers literally couldn't win. Success proved they were witches. Failure proved they were murderous witches. The medical knowledge that took generations to accumulate was systematically destroyed as entire communities of healers were executed for the crime of being competent at healthcare. Universities eventually took over medical training, but only for men and only with church approval, effectively eliminating centuries of practical medical wisdom. because it was deemed too dangerous for ordinary people to possess. Number 2, being too good at mathematics or showing unusual intelligence was life-threatening. Medieval society had very specific ideas about how smart regular people were supposed to be, and exceeding those expectations could mark you as unnaturally gifted, meaning supernaturally gifted. The ability to perform complex calculations or understand advanced concepts was seen as evidence of demonic tutoring, because the average person wasn't supposed to be capable of such intellectual feats without supernatural assistance. Scholars and mathematicians had to be extremely careful about demonstrating their abilities publicly, because crowds couldn't distinguish between natural talent and magical enhancement. Someone who could quickly solve mathematical problems or predict astronomical events might be admired in controlled academic settings, but in everyday life they risked being accused of fortune-telling or communicating with spirits. The paranoia extended to basic literacy in some regions, where reading and writing were so rare that anyone who possessed these skills without obvious religious training became suspect. Some brilliant individuals had to deliberately hide their capabilities, pretending to be less intelligent than they actually were just to avoid suspicion from neighbors who couldn't understand natural intellectual gifts. The medieval world was so threatened by unexplained intelligence that they preferred ignorance over the risk of accidentally harboring someone with supernatural knowledge. Number 1. Surviving diseases that killed others automatically made you suspicious of witchcraft. This is perhaps the most tragic superstition because it punished people for being lucky enough to live through epidemics that devastated medieval communities. When plagues swept through villages killing entire families, anyone who survived without obvious explanation became a prime suspect for having supernatural protection. The logic was devastatingly simple. If God sent disease as punishment for sin, then people who avoided that punishment must have made deals with opposing forces to protect themselves. Survivors faced accusations of causing the diseases in the first place, supposedly spreading illness through curses while keeping themselves safe through demonic bargains. Some plague survivors were literally chased out of their own communities or killed by neighbors who blamed them for the deaths of loved ones. The psychological torture was incredible. Imagine losing your entire family to disease, being one of the few people left alive in your village, and then being told you're responsible for everyone's deaths because you didn't die too. Medical immunity wasn't understood, so natural resistance to diseases looked like supernatural intervention to medieval minds. People who survived multiple epidemics were seen as walking proof of witchcraft, accumulating suspicion with each outbreak they lived through until communities decided they were too dangerous to tolerate. That's all for now. I'll make similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.